All right, so today we are taking a deep dive into a Reddit post, and this one really got people talking. Over 1,000 comments on this thing.
It's amazing what gets people fired up sometimes. And this one wasn't even like super dramatic, no cheating scandal or anything.
Right, right. It's more about like the gray areas of dating.
Exactly.
So basically, we have this 31-year-old guy, and he's asking for advice on how to let a woman down gently. And the reason he wants to break up is, well, kind of sensitive.
Yeah, he's basically saying he's just not physically attracted to her.
And to be fair to the guy, he does say he likes her as a person.
Mm.
Describes her as smart, successful.
He does. But he's also very clear that physical fitness is like a big deal for him. And she had lost a bunch of weight.
Oh, okay. So that's part of it.
Yeah, it sounds like the weight loss led to, some loose skin. And he mentions that she wasn't into weight training or anything like that.
I see. So he's struggling with this, like, internal conflict. Likes her personality, but not feeling that spark.
Right. And so he chose to Reddit, specifically the Ask Men Advice community, with this question. How do you let someone down easy without revealing the true reason? The reason that might hurt.
Oh, man, I can already see how this is going to get complicated.
Oh, it totally does. Over 1,000 comments, all these different opinions on how to handle this. It becomes this fascinating conversation about honesty versus kindness and the responsibility we have when we're rejecting someone, especially for something as personal as their appearance.
It's such a tricky situation. Like,
Yeah.
where's the line between sparing someone's feelings and maybe, like, being misleading?
Exactly.
So right off the bat, most people are saying, don't tell her the real reason. It was all about protecting her self-esteem, especially since she's just gone through this weight loss journey.
And if we think about it, that loose skin is kind of like a battle scar, from that journey, something she might already be sensitive about.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of it like that.
So many comments were focused on that, on the impact of his words, how sensitive this topic is.
So what were people suggesting he say instead?
Well, most common advice was to use the lack of chemistry line.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
Right. It's almost become like a code word for incompatibility. Vague enough to avoid anything specific, but still gets the point across.
But I wonder if that really gives closure, or is it just kind of delaying the inevitable hurt?
That's a good question. And speaking of delaying things, some people even suggested he use the holidays as an excuse, like he's swamped with family stuff.
Oh, come on. That's just...
Right. But even in the thread, people were pushing back on that, saying it just prolongs things, makes it more confusing later on.
It's like putting off the hard conversation, but you're still going to have it eventually.
Exactly. And that's where things start to get really interesting. It's not just about the advice, but this whole debate that blew up around honesty versus kindness in rejection.
Right, right. Like, is there ever a time when you should be brutally honest, even if it's painful? Or is it always better to soften the blow?
And in this case, it's even more complicated because her physical appearance is directly related to a positive change she made in her life.
Losing weight, yeah.
Yeah.
So criticizing that could really backfire. It's
Right.
like punishing her for doing something good for herself.
And that brings up a huge question. What is our responsibility to someone we're breaking up with? Do we prioritize their feelings or do we tell the whole truth, even if it hurts?
Man, this is heavy stuff.
Mhm.
Honestly, this is making me think about my own approach to dating, how I handle rejection, and how I'd want to be treated if I were in her shoes.
I think that's a great takeaway. This isn't just about this one guy, it's about all of us and how we navigate these tricky emotional situations. So before we jump into more specifics in part 2, I'm curious, what's standing out to you so far? All right, welcome back to our deep dive. We're talking honesty, kindness, all that good stuff when it comes to breaking up with someone.
And trying to figure out how to let someone down easy, but still, be true to yourself. So where'd we leave off? Oh, right, Reddit had spoken. Don't tell her the real reason for the breakup.
Right, right. Too much potential for hurt there. But they did have some other ideas, like a ton of them.
So let's break down those alternatives.
One that stuck with me was keeping it simple, just saying, I don't have the feels for her.
Short and sweet, no room for interpretation. Get the point across.
Exactly. A lot of people were on board with that approach. Like, just keep it vague, Another suggestion was, I don't think we're a good fit.
Or we're not right for each other. Yeah. Those are classics for a reason, I guess.
Yeah, they kind of work. It's like you're saying it's not working, but you're not saying it's her fault,
Yeah, it's not placing blame, just acknowledging that something's not clicking.
Right. And then there was a whole lack of connection approach. A lot of people liked that one.
Oh, like, I've enjoyed our time together, but I'm not feeling a deeper connection.
Yeah, something like that. It acknowledges the good parts, but ultimately says something's missing.
And it's not about something being wrong with her. It's more like the us isn't really forming. So I got to ask, what about those people who are suggesting he use the I'm too busy excuse,
Hmm.
especially with the holidays and all?
Honestly, that was the one I was least convinced by. It feels like a cop-out, Sure, it might be easier in the moment, but
You're just going to have to deal with it later. And it might even be worse then, especially if she tries to reconnect after the holidays thinking everything's cool.
right. Then you gotta reject her all over again. Not good. Plus, even on Reddit, people were calling that out, saying it's better to be honest up front, even if you gotta soften the blow a little.
Because leading someone on, even if you think you're being nice, can actually do more harm than good.
Exactly. It's tricky, but I think the main takeaway is that honesty, but with tact and empathy, is ultimately the most respectful way to go.
Not brutal honesty, but not sugarcoating it to the point where it's misleading either. It's all about finding that balance.
And that's a good lesson for and a tough conversation, really, not just breakups.
Oh, totally. Ending friendships, giving critical feedback, even turning down a job offer.
It's all about being direct, but compassionate, finding that sweet spot.
This whole Reddit thread has been super eye-opening,
Yeah,
making me think about how I handle those kind of situations.
I think that's awesome. It's about that self-reflection, right? And this post, it wasn't just about one guy's problem. It reflects the whole dating scene, those challenges we all face.
Oh, for sure.
So there were a couple other suggestions I wanted to run by you. What about being upfront about wanting a partner who's into fitness, like he is?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I mean, I says being honest about what he's looking for,
Right.
but it could also come across as like he's criticizing her for not being into it.
Yeah, and especially in this case, her body is a direct result of her weight loss journey. So it's almost like saying, great job losing the weight, but you're still not good enough for me.
Yeah, ouch. And a lot of people pointed that out in the comments. Like, it's one thing to have preferences, it's another to make someone feel bad about their choices.
Right, like you can say, I'm looking for someone who prioritizes fitness without saying, you don't, and that's a problem.
It's like saying, I'm a vegetarian versus you eat meat, that's disgusting.
One's a preference, the other's a judgment.
Perfect analogy. So yeah, even with honesty, got to be careful not to come across as disrespectful or like you're putting someone down.
There was this other thread that got me thinking, the whole idea of physical attraction evolving over time. Like, can you actually become more attracted to someone as you get to know them, even if you weren't super into them physically at first?
Oh, that's interesting. And, there were a bunch of people who shared stories about exactly that happening to them, starting out not so attracted, but then bam.
It's like that whole beauty is in the eye of the beholder thing, but maybe the eye can change. As you connect with someone's personality, you literally start to see them differently.
Right. And that makes you wonder, how many times do we write someone off too soon based on that first impression?
Maybe there's something to be said for taking it slow, letting that emotional connection build first. Like building a foundation before you put up the walls. Because if you rush into things, you might miss out on something special.
This is turning into a whole dating guide.
It is, kinda. Who knew Reddit could be so insightful?
It's like crowdsourcing emotional intelligence or something.
But honestly, it's kinda cool to see these platforms being used for real advice and support.
Speaking of advice,
Mhm.
what about those comments suggesting he just ghosted her?
Ugh, the ghosting debate. Always a hot topic.
Yeah, people were definitely divided on that one. Some were like, it's the easiest way, least drama. But others were like, no way, that's cowardly and disrespectful.
I'm kinda in that second camp. To me, ghosting is like avoiding the problem. It's easier for you, but it doesn't give the other person any closure.
Exactly. Even a simple text like, hey, this isn't working for me, is better than just disappearing. You got to acknowledge the other person as a human being, even if you're breaking up with them.
And it's interesting, some of the people who were pro-ghosting, it seemed like they were just scared of confrontation. Which is understandable, but as we've been talking about, sometimes those hard conversations are necessary
Oh, yeah.
for both people involved.
It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. It stings, but then you can heal.
Right.
Okay, another thread I thought was super interesting was about the double standard when it comes to physical attraction, especially in dating.
Oh yeah, totally. People were calling out the hypocrisy. Like, if a GY says he prioritizes physical attraction, he's shallow. But women are often encouraged to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's like this unspoken rule. Men are supposed to look past appearances, but women get to be more picky. Why is that?
It goes back to those old gender roles and expectations, doesn't it?
I think so. And this whole Reddit post, it's kind of forcing us to examine those assumptions.
Yeah, like everyone should be allowed to have preferences, right?
Hmm.
Whether you're a man or a woman. And it's okay to acknowledge that physical attraction, a factor, as long as it's not the only bifactor factor.
Exactly.
Attraction's complicated. It's not just about looks. It's about personality, shared values, all of that.
So going back to the original poster, it seems like he's got to figure out a few things. Is this lack of attraction a deal breaker, or is it something that could change?
And if he does decide to end things, how can he do it in a way that's both honest and kind? It's a tough spot to be in.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We've gone way beyond just this one Reddit post. It's about communication, honesty, all the messy stuff that comes with relationships.
And we're not done yet. We've still got some juicy comments to get to in part 3.
Yeah, we've saved some of the most thought-provoking and controversial stuff for last.
We'll be talking about whether honesty is always the best policy, how societal beauty standards play into all of this. It's going to be good.
So before we jump into that, just wanted to remind our listeners that liking and subscribing really helps us out. It helps us reach more people and keep having these conversations. We appreciate every single one of you.
And if you're looking for more, be sure to check out Shauna Pelage's YouTube channel. She talks about relationships, personal growth, all kinds of interesting stuff.
But for now, stay curious, stay compassionate, and we'll see you in part 3 for the grand finale. Okay, so we're back for the final part of this deep dive, and let me tell you, things are about to get real. We've been dissecting this Reddit post about, well, rejecting a date and uncovering so much about honesty and kindness and just the whole tangled web of attraction.
It's amazing how one post can spiral out into this huge conversation.
Right. And like we said, we've saved some of the most intense comments for last. So let's just jump right in. One of the biggest debates was about whether the guy is actually obligated to tell her the real reason he wants to end things.
Yeah, is brutal honesty always the best policy, even if it hurts?
That's the question, isn't it? And there were definitely people arguing both sides. Some were saying he owes it to her to be upfront about the lack of physical attraction, that maybe it could help her avoid similar situations in the future.
Like, would you rather have the harsh truth or a nice lie that makes you feel good but doesn't really solve anything?
Exactly. But like we talked about before, most people felt that in this case, telling her the truth would just cause more pain than it's worth. Especially because of the loose skin being tied to her weight loss, something she's probably already sensitive about.
It's about being honest, but not cruel. There's a way to deliver truth without just crushing someone's self-esteem. Like one commenter said, and I loved this, she doesn't need a checklist of what's wrong.
Ooh, that's good. Sometimes less is more. You don't have to dissect everything.
Right, and at the end of the day, he's ending it anyway, so why add insult to injury? It's about being thoughtful, even when it's hard.
Another thread that really grabbed my attention was about whether physical attraction can actually grow over time. Like, even if you don't feel it right away, can you develop it as you get to know someone?
That's a great question, and honestly, reading those personal stories, I'm starting to think it's definitely possible. People were sharing about relationships that started with, like, zero physical spark, but then things changed.
It's like, maybe love doesn't have to be blind, but you can wear glasses, you know?
I like that.
You start to see someone differently as you connect with their personality, their sense of humor.
It challenges that whole love at first sight thing. Maybe we dismiss people too quickly sometimes.
Maybe. It makes you want to give people more of a chance, see if that connection can grow.
And that goes back to the original poster. Maybe this isn't a total deal breaker for him. Maybe it's something to think about, you know?
There was one comment thread that really got me fired up. It was about how all these societal beauty standards, especially for women, can just create unrealistic expectations in dating.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one. People were talking about the pressure on women to fit a certain mold even after losing weight, which is such an accomplishment in itself. It's like they're still not good enough.
It's so messed up.
Yeah.
And it makes dating feel like this impossible game, you know? Like no matter what you do, it's never enough.
We need to challenge those standards, celebrate all body types.
Yes. So much of this deep dive has been about challenging assumptions, right? About honesty, about attraction, even about what we expect from relationships.
This Reddit thread, it's like a window into how complicated and messy human relationships are.
And there are no easy answers.
Nope.
But we can try to be self-aware, empathetic, Communicate honestly and respectfully.
And maybe if we start having those tough conversations, if we push back against those ridiculous standards, dating and relationships can become a little kinder, a little more understanding.
And this has been a journey. We've laughed, we've felt empathy. I think we've even gotten a little angry.
We have.
But hopefully we've all learned something about ourselves, about how we connect with each other.
So thanks for coming along on this deep dive with us. Keep those conversations going, challenge those assumptions, and never stop exploring what it means to be human.
And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe to Voices of the Soul for more deep dives like this. We appreciate every single one of you who listens, who comments, who joins us in these explorations.
And if you want even more, check out Shauna Pelage's YouTube channel. She's got tons of great content on relationships, personal growth, all that good stuff.
But for now, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep asking those tough questions. We'll see you on the next deep dive.